So, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, probably one of the best road movies ever made, and Tim Burton's theatrical debut. What makes this movie so amazing for a Tim Burton fan? Not necessarily. I'm not that familiar with Pee Wee Herman outside of this movie. What makes it interesting for a Tim Burton fan is that for his feature-length movies, this is obviously the lowest budget, which means that most of this film is shot on location, as opposed to being created in a studio, which is much, much different to see a film that's almost entirely on location, to see how his style translates in retrospective to what we know today off of stuff like, Edward Scissorhands, or Ed Wood, or Mars Attacks. It's very interesting to go back to 1985 and see his style within a much more moderate, lower budget. I think the result can best be described by a documentary special feature on Blue Velvet on the DVD, where it talked about the concept of American surrealism. The American surrealism is not the craziness of Dali, of flesh molding and clocks melting, but rather the oddness of something completely out of place to the audience, just opposed to normal society, and regarded by that normal society as just yet another element in day-to-day life. This is in contrast to the television show Pee-wee's Playhouse, which is overtly outside of the normal, very surreal. Now this is inside the normal, the real world, but just odd, just off-putting. And that's what makes it much more surreal, to me at least. I kind of think when you go back looking at this movie and you look at it, a lot of the reason that modern Tim Burton movies aren't really as good has to do with him having too high of a budget. I mean, as people get older, they repeat the same thing, and they're not able to do their original greatness as good as they were the first time. Or they kind of water down their edginess or their more appealing aspects to a cult audience and try to be more mainstream. Now, I don't know necessarily if that has to do with Tim Burton. Certainly he is milking big budget remakes, but also the age of a low budget really does help film, I think, in ensuring originality. The limits of low budget by necessity create an atmosphere which is more cohesive towards originality. That being said, the movie itself is about Pee Wee Herman, or Paul Rubin as the Pee Wee Herman character, trying to find his bike, which has been stolen or lost, you could say. And to go about this, he goes on a road trip. Interesting stops along the way. I think the line that really summarizes this movie for me is, "I'm a rebel, Dottie." Because this movie is just completely and absolutely defined by fish out of water humor and American surrealism. It's a very great movie. Now we have to address the pink elephant in the room about Paul Rubin being into porn. Let's just say it. Paul Rubin is a rich gay guy, and he likes porn. Now, did he masturbate in a public theater? I don't know. Did he plea bargain to get out of masturbating in a public theater? I don't know. But he went to a public movie theater, adult movie theater, and got rounded up. So it must have been an area where gay men met each other to have casual sex. Later, his home was raided, and many vintage homosexual erotica was found, and his ownership of this caused him to be accused of ownership of child pornography. Not really child in a sense, but pederast pornography. Now, is this pederast pornography? Probably not, since it was thrown out. It was probably what is somewhat pornographic to a homosexual in the current atmosphere, but when the time it was created, often muscle magazines, it probably was not pornographic in its intent, but became pornographic over time with the increase of the gay culture being more prominent within society. Now, the question comes up because of this: would I let my children watch this movie? Yes, but I wouldn't let my children alone with them, if that makes sense. And also, I would make sure to prevent them from seeing, I believe, I haven't seen it yet. Now, I could be completely wrong. The third movie, where his this is much more in the front, or the other kind of like improv material or stand-up comedy, which is far more raunchy and humorous upon what is assumed to be or quite obvious Ruben's homosexuality. Anyway, again, I want to reiterate, this movie is a very, very good movie. You can see how Tim Burton took off from this movie. It really defines what almost every good Tim Burton movie is about. And when he strays away from this, it kind of ruins it. Is the loner character who's outside of society, who goes on some kind of out-of-fish adventure. Whether that loner character be Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, or Pee Wee Herman. That's kind of this formula which has made Tim Burton one of the most popular and appealing cult directors in the world today.